Welcome to Middle Fingers Up. I'm your host, Kieran. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys a few questions. What does it mean to belong somewhere? Who gets to decide where someone should grow up or which culture they should call their own? How often do we accept the story we're told without asking more, without questioning it? And then when someone tells us they're doing something, quote unquote, for your own good, do we stop enough to ask good for whom? And who benefits when helping is framed as a hero story, when saving someone else becomes a chance to feel righteous or kind? Today's conversation asks us to slow our roll and really interrogate, investigate, put your curious cap, whatever you want to call it, but really get into breaking apart some of these questions to look beyond intention and examine systems, because sometimes these good intentions that we're brought up with or we're taught about end up doing real bad things and end up harming us more than we thought they would. So I came across our guest, Moses, and his work online. As I always say, my algorithm seems to get me lately and sends me wonderful people my way when I'm trolling on Instagram. And what really caught me with Moses is that when first of all, he speaks very openly about being taken from South Korea, his home birthplace, and adopted into a white family, what that process was like for him. But what really, really caught my attention wasn't just the story and the sacred part behind it, but it's how he's naming it and what he's teaching us about this word adoption that many of us have known all our life. Moses talks about what many of us call adoption as child trafficking, and rather than rushing to agree or to disagree, I'm really inviting everyone today to join this conversation with a lot of curiosity, with a lot of space. I think this episode is going to ask us to sit with discomfort. I think it's going to help us question rescue narratives and hopefully start to understand how systems of power and profit can shape children's lives long after they've been moved from their homes. So this is Moses Farrow. Let's get into it. Welcome, Moses. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. And thank you for that introduction to hopefully all that we're going to cover today.
Yeah, I feel like today's topic is this conversation of saved or separated, reframing adoption and trafficking and this whole savior narrative that shows up in many different parts of the systems that we have to belong to. And what I'm really looking forward to is just learning through your experience, the work that you're doing in the background, and how people like me and others can also start stepping up to the plate and understanding what it means when vulnerable kids are taken from their homes and we're taught that it's, for the greater good. But before we do that, is there anything in your intro? Like, I didn't even mention that you're a therapist. So is there anything in your intro or something special about you that I didn't add that you want us to know and add?
Well, I am a therapist. I specialize in trauma for specific populations at this point, which we're getting into. So I'm a trauma therapist, I'm a trauma educator, and an activist. And I've come into all of these parts of my work, parts of my career, at different points in my life, based on what I have learned along the way that has helped me to understand, oh, there's more to the issues, more to what needs to be done, more to what I need to be doing.
Mm.
So, first off, this is such a huge topic. This is such a huge issue. It's global. I mean, you and I are talking between countries right now, right? So we're talking about a global industry with localized operations. I mean, this is huge to unpack.
Mhm.
And along with that, there's so much confusion that I've run into. Things that I've needed to unlearn and relearn for myself, my
Yeah.
own experiences, and then how to help others who have been caught up in this industry as well. So the focus of my work, the focus of my therapy, all of that has changed over the years to realizing there's an intersection between having to educate as well as to be out there on the front lines saying there's something really wrong. There are false narratives being pushed in front of us.
Mhm.
And it does leave us with the question, well, do we just take it on face value or do we start questioning what we've been told? So I really appreciate that part of the introduction. And I'd say that is a good place to start.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
I
okay.
think your expertise in trauma, there's such a parallel process between personally, I would imagine, the experiences that you would have had as a little baby, as a child, across a lifespan growing up, and then somehow doing the work with other clients as well. And so I bet we're
Mhm.
gonna go back and forth with that as we talk today. So the question of, okay, how do we question this? So maybe we start there. I was gonna get you to go into the time machine that I have with MFU. We are such a huge podcast that we have built this time machine here. This is how amazing we are at
That
MFU.
is so
The first and the only time machine. But when we talk about questioning and unlearning, and so we're learning that a lot of our questioning does start at the beginning, and a lot of us are in the middle of a story and we don't quite go to the beginning of how did I get to this place, how did I learn
Mhm.
these conversations, this dialogue, all the sort of things that we've biases, all these things we've been taught, whether it be
Mhm.
by people or environment. So if you got into our time machine and we went back to your childhood, and I always just pick a random age, but you're welcome to pick the age that maybe means the most to you. I was thinking of the age of 10. When it comes to identity, we start to remember a lot and know a little bit before that little before the whole preteen sort of world. And so I'm curious, like for you, for little Moses, what was childhood when you look back now? What was it like? Were you feeling loved? Were you feeling healthy? Did you feel a sense of belonging? I know these are all loaded questions, but
Mhm.
somehow along the way, your journey has brought you to where you are today. So I just want to go back and meet the little guy who was trying to figure this
Mhm.
stuff out and, had to carry this world on the
Mhm.
shoulders of a 10-year-old or 9-year-old or whatever age, like I said, that shows up for you.
First off, it's so great to have a time machine. I talk a lot about Back to the Future,
Yeah.
and, and that was certainly a movie that I grew up watching, and I don't, I've lost track how many times I've watched it. But so age 10, I am going to dial it back even further
Yeah. Yeah.
to being a toddler, having been born in South Korea and being brought over to the U.S. As you said, growing up in a family with a white American mother. And the story that I was told, so it goes that I was found in a phone booth in Seoul. I was just an infant, and I was wrapped in a blanket, and some passerby who needed to use the phone found a baby instead and brought me to the SWS, which is the Social Welfare Society at the time. And that's how I entered into the orphanage system there. And then I was uh, adopted. And I'll just use that language as we
Yeah.
evolve that in the conversation. At this point, come back to now, at this point, I say I was taken from my homeland.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened when I was a toddler. And so all throughout my childhood, that was the narrative that took shape in all different ways, where I was abandoned in a phone booth. I was left in a phone booth. I was unwanted. These are typical things that we pick up along the way as we grow up. And when it's not challenged or questioned, belief becomes our reality.
Mm.
And so that was my reality. And when I arrived, in the years after I arrived, it solidified, being in that age, it solidified that I have no family left in South Korea. This is my new family. This is my family now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the belief that I carried throughout my entire childhood. So that's the thing about it. As a child, we're hugely dependent and we're hugely impressionable to take things on face value.
Yeah.
And along the way, so my childhood carried this falsehood and spun, into a story. And for many years as a child, all I kept thinking every time it came up, every time I was told I came from an orphanage and left in a phone booth, my gut instinct was, I want to go back and help the other orphans.
Hmm.
So that was like right from the beginning. Every time I reheard my own story, I just wanted to go back and help the others. And as I got older, um, it became more about how to survive in the here and now. And so I'm out there saying that I'm a survivor of childhood abuse. And so a lot of my intention growing up became about how to survive in an abusive household.
Mm.
And all the adoption stuff went by the wayside. And it rekindled, you could say, it came back up once I became an adult and more independent and more, shall we say, freer to start unpacking where I came from and my roots and everything. So, yeah, I really wish there was a time machine.
Yeah. Would you go back?
Yeah.
What would you say if you could go back? What would you
Hmm.
say to little you, knowing what you know now?
Hmm. I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah?
um, I,
You have. You're a therapist. There's no way you have not thought about that.
it's kind of funny when you ask it like that, right? What would I tell my younger
Yeah.
self?
Yeah.
So much of what I'm doing with my clients today is validating
Mhm.
feelings that they had when they were children, when they were taken, when they were placed. And I've had so many people tell me, yeah, I had a feeling.
Mm.
I knew something was wrong. I knew something was off. I knew something was not right. And as children, we act out. So rather than disciplining and being made to feel there was something wrong with me and it was always my fault. I was always blamed for acting up and doing all kinds of things. It would have been nice to have someone there to say, I get it. I know what was done to you. I know what happened to you. It makes sense why you're acting out. It makes sense why you're having these feelings. And it's important to give children that. It's important to give ourselves, the inner child in us and ourselves, that to say, I know why. And I see it, and what was done to you was wrong.
Hmm. That's huge. And like yourself and the work you're doing now, would you say that's a common theme for a lot of clients, and that lack of belonging and not having that sort of sense of safety from a caregiver, an adult? We're all entitled to at least one. And so would you say a lot of those clients would be in this boat of not having had that from anyone? And
Hmm.
as adults, we've all been kids. Some of us have kids. We've been around them. And it's such a crucial part of our development. Creativity, imagination, play, all these things are supposed to help us in that development phase. And when that safety isn't there, and that reminder that you belong, or the validation, as you said, when that's not there, what happens for those kids growing up, would you say?
What happens to those kids?
Mhm.
So let's unpack this a little bit and bring it back out to that there is a global industry behind all this. And from that lens, what you just shared, we're told a certain narrative. We're made to believe in lies that we eventually uncover, hopefully, as adults. So there's an intentionality behind feeding us lies and making us believe in something that's not real. And so from that, whenever we act out, whenever we question, whenever we step out of line, so speak, we're made to feel like it's our fault. So just wanting to adjust the language, you brought up not feeling like we belong, to no, it's more about we're being blamed,
Mm.
where we're being made to feel like there's something wrong with us because we haven't adapted, we haven't assimilated, we haven't adjusted, we haven't fallen in line
Mhm.
with the role that we're put into. And that's a nuance, but an important distinction between the way that you put it, not feeling like we belong, to actually, it's not about not belonging, it's we're made to feel there's something wrong with us
Mhm.
from people who know that they did something wrong to us. And that particular thread of belief carries forward and becomes internalized and expands out to we're unwanted, we're abandoned, we're not lovable, we don't belong, expands
Mhm.
out to all these things. But we're put into a role that no one tells us how to be,
Yeah.
right? So I want to spend a moment on this. No one tells us how to play, how to be in this role, how to play this role, because everyone else is saying it's got to be as authentic and as real as possible. It's a fantasy. The only way to make it as real and authentic is to have it happen naturally, not to have it be any more scripted than it already is. So we're all told that children are blank slates.
Mm.
You can rename them. You could put them in whatever clothes you want. You can dress them up. You can, right? And they will eventually fall in line. They will eventually fulfill their role for you. But we're human beings. We have independent minds and personalities and everything that develops over time, right? So we are who we are. We are who we are born as. So it's, how do you say, like a catch-22? It's it's a double bind. How are we supposed to play the role that you want us to play when you don't tell us, and then it becomes our fault when we don't match your expectations? Now, the last piece to this is when we don't match expectations, we're made to believe, we're told we're defective. There's something wrong with this kid. They're not behaving, they're not being what you said they would be like. And re-enter the industry, people going back to the agencies or the social workers and saying, you gave me a defective kid.
Yeah.
What do I do? Oh, we'll take him back, we'll put him in a different home, and we'll get you another kid if you want. We'll do another deal.
Yeah. That's legit how it goes in care. I mean, and I know that word, you and I talked about care in our consult, foster care, kinship, all these places where kids are temporarily placed before either being, as we are using the word, adopted or moved along. That's literally the message that they're getting is, take them back. Here's my receipt. I want a refund. And I had mentioned to you in the crisis work that I was doing for many years, we would get parents, white parents, they all seem to be white parents who are adopting kids of color, and the kid is, as you're saying, acting out, and they're not fitting the mold that this parent had fantasized they thought it would go. And now they're with us doing work. And many times a conversation was, they needed, they've had this child for years, and now they're entering the adolescent years, and we know hormones, biology, just in that complicated timeline for young people. And then you throw in this other piece, a kid's been taken from their homeland. So a lot of times these parents would say, like, yeah, I need to send them back. Like, I'm done. And we're like, well, that's called neglect. You're abandoning. I just come out and say it. But that is the message. Many of these kids, when we would meet with them, they would say, like, all my life I've been told that I had to be a certain way. And when I couldn't be that way, then I wasn't good enough. And I'm told how I'm supposed to be. And I'm also told that I need to be grateful that I'm here in Canada in a safe place and blah, 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 as you know. And so that now I'm not grateful enough. And I'm imagining that's, if not your own experience, the experiences of many people like yourself that have been brought from their home country and placed in these homes where it's, you're not grateful enough. You should be happy that we did this for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this aspect. This seems like another good segue to addressing the language and the terms that then set us on these certain mindsets about, we saved you. You did mention saviorism, right? We
Yes.
saved you. And you also brought up, it does seem to be a large population of white people going into developing countries
Yeah.
and saving their children, war-torn countries or natural disasters. And so there's a very strong saviorism behind this. And along with that is this other piece that says you should be grateful for being saved. Now, I've flipped that a little bit. And I'm wondering if it's too early to get into some other things. But
Never too early here.
okay, okay. So from what I've learned in more recent years, and I'm going to say in like the last 10 years, right? What I've learned, there's a large number of us who are dying early, who are killing ourselves,
Mhm.
who are outright being killed and murdered on a mass scale.
Mhm.
And so this gratitude part of the narrative is really more like you should be grateful that you're not one of them, that you're still alive, that you're not feeling the need to kill yourself because we've given you everything possible. And thankfully, you're not placed with murderers,
Mhm.
right? So I'm just switching that part
Mhm.
of the gratitude narrative to being like, oh, now that I've had to open my eyes to, like I've had to come into realize I'm a member of a population, a global population. We're not just being taken and displaced, and however you want to put it, right? We're being murdered. We're left with overwhelming pain that is far beyond our capacity to process and manage. So isn't it only natural to say, I don't want to live with this pain anymore?
Hmm.
And early life, what's called adverse childhood experiences turn into chronic illnesses, chronic stress. We're dying much earlier than if our bodies weren't already trying to either protect us from this overwhelming pain from childhood, and bodies where our certain aspects of our traumas are not being acknowledged.
Yeah.
So no one's telling us, yeah, you're a member of a global population of victims who are murdered, who are being assimilated, colonized.
Mhm.
Like there's so many other aspects to this industry. That's kind of why I'm saying we're gonna jump into the deep end
Yeah,
right off the
yeah.
bat here because
Well, how can you not?
this is what's happening today.
Yeah.
It's still going on,
Yeah.
and as victims of this industry, we're still being fed false narratives, propaganda. We're made to believe that we're still the problem if we're not fitting into that fantasy.
Mhm. Mhm.
But the reality is, it is life or death out there.
Yeah, I see you sharing pictures and names for the community that you've created for those of us that are coming by and learning of these are real people. This is a baby. This is a helpless child. This is now an adult who has taken their lives because they have not had the capacity, as you're saying, to manage the experience throughout the years that they've had, the stories they've been told, and all these sorts of things. And yet we still see one of the most common justifications from kids being brought, from overseas to North America, Australia, the Western world, is the belief that a child is being given, quote unquote, a better life. So the argument always is no one seems to look at what's happening. Everything seems like it's individual and it's not connected. It's not a pattern. So that young Black kid from one community versus the Indian boy from a different community, and the little girl from the Indigenous girl, like all of that, it's not connected. These are all individual case scenarios. So we're
Mhm.
being taught that in the media, if it comes up in the media, and we know that anyone from the BIPOC community and their tragic story is usually brushed under all the other important quote unquote stories that the Western world thinks should come out. So if we get the story, we think, oh, okay, this happened. as a one-off. And then the argument people will make constantly is it's still better to take that child from the South Korean orphanage who would have just, been neglected there, would have grown up with no family, or from a very poor village, wouldn't have been fed, wouldn't have been given this kind of life, and been in, who knows if he would have survived there or not, probably wouldn't. Isn't it still better that he was given a chance and brought to North America or the Western world? And so this is the common argument that I see comes up constantly. Well, it's still better. It's still better. So I'm curious, like, how do you respond to that? What do you have to say to that? What's the follow-up conversation to that?
I'm chomping at the bit right now to
You're like, shut up, Kieran, let me go.
Let's unpack this one. So, and let's jump back into the time machine 400 years ago. Okay. 1618. We're talking about the child migration schemes out of Britain, right, out of the UK, landing in US colonies at the time. And the way children were being taken came out of two phrases. Well, actually, two phrases that make up one phrase. So, adoption is in the best interest of your child because it will give them a better life. This is where this phrase that is now part of policy around the world came from 400 years ago, that has been pushed through the centuries to still show up today as this is, yes, adoption is a beautiful thing, it's a wonderful thing, it saves children's lives, everything that you just mentioned. The reality at that time in Britain was traffickers were going into impoverished homes to make the sales pitch of adoption is in the best interest of your child because it will give them a better life for two reasons: health and education. Now, take note of those two. So fast forward, we now have what's called the Hague Adoption Convention. This is meant for, and again, I'm using the language, inter-country adoptions, right? And hundreds, I think I can still say that, hundreds of countries have ratified the Hague Adoption Convention that leads off with, this is in the best interest of all children. So it's come out in the war between Russia and Ukraine that Ukrainian children were being, quote, adopted into Russian families with the same phrase and the same 2 points: better life in Russia for health and education. And in the media, this has all been labeled, it's a war crime. Taking Ukrainian children under the guise of adoption for health and education, putting them into Russian families. So bring it back to assimilation, calling it just eradication. We're talking about global-sized crimes against humanity that goes along with the mass murder. It's not happening just in the US. There are children being murdered in Canada, UK, India, South Korea, really anywhere this industry has an operation going. And so it all stems from targeting impoverished families in whatever country to say adoption is in the best interest of your child because it will give them a better life. Let's unpack what adoption is if we can.
Yeah.
If it's possible, because this is huge, right?
Yes.
The way that I have landed, that I've been putting it this way for more than a year, I'll say. the way human trafficking and adoption is connected is, this is my phrase, the human trafficking industry uses adoption as propaganda to run a global child supply market. So it's a slight change to simply saying adoption is human trafficking or child trafficking. It's always been the human trafficking industry, these hundreds of years, and really you can date it back to thousands of years, but the organized industry as we know it today has stemmed from 400 years ago, using the word adoption to say this is in the best interest because it will give them a better life. So it's always been the human trafficking industry that's simply used this word. It's a euphemism. It's a cover-up. It's a illusion, a ploy, a disguise, right? A smokescreen to cover up the crimes of trafficking, not just children, their mothers and fathers, their families as well. So we need to identify what human trafficking is. We need to define that in order to realize, oh, the definition of adoption is different. The terms are not the same. Adoption is not human trafficking. The human trafficking industry uses adoption as propaganda to brainwash everybody into thinking saving children, creating families, while running a global child supply market in which the industry rakes in billions of dollars, destroying human lives, devastating communities, permanently separating families. So that's how I put it at this point. That's everything that I've accrued in my knowledge and education, re-education, to realize, okay, there's a pre-existing human trafficking industry that has just, oh yeah, this is a great word, to normalize it, to make it socially acceptable, to even make it legal, put it into policies. This is how we're going to get away with our crimes in plain sight around the world. Everyone's going to buy into it because everyone wants that feel-good experience of we're saving children, creating families, we're doing something good. And all the traffickers pocketing the money, making all these profits, are behind the scenes laughing in our faces. Boy, have we got them.
It's not a one-way street. Like, there's so many paths along the way. And so when you look at it on a map, it's wild how to get to, there's multiple routes to getting to where we're trying to get to, which is, how did we get here? You're putting in all these important points that share how we got here. And I think as you're talking, like, I'm thinking of those that have taken a part in this with the belief of, well, we adopted our child from Africa or India or wherever. This is different. And so where is that line, if there is one, of, well, does it matter what happens in that household? Because that adult believes, well, we truly did take this or adopt this child from this foreign country because we couldn't have our own children. And I think religion plays a part in a lot of this as well. There's a lot of religious institutions out there that also support go save, go help. This is God's work and whatnot. So now how could my provider, God, lie to me, because God is the one that helped me bring this beautiful child from this country into my home? And so I'm just, because when you explain it, it makes sense. But I know there's a lot of solid ass arguments out there that would just flush all this down the toilet and say, this Moses is just acting out from his own childhood and the two clients he's worked with. when we know that we are a community that have brought so many of these kids from Haiti or these kids from China, these kids from South Korea, wherever that is outside of North America. And these kids are growing up because they know their Black heritage, they know their Asian heritage, so it's different. So I'm curious in like, is it because they don't know that they exchanged in? I can't even get the questions out because
Yeah.
it's like
So again,
it's like learning, seeing something for the first time and then asking me to write an essay on it, right? I'm like, I don't know the words to this. I don't know what this is. I'm just trying to, so sorry that my questions are,
no apology
I can't even
needed.
get them out.
I'll tell you, because you hit a couple points personal to me. Here I am as a victim of this industry, going against a dominant accepted
Yeah.
narrative, and the way that you put it, me and my two clients,
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
who's going to believe us, who's going to listen to us. And so a huge piece of my process, or a huge what I stand on, is the truth. Everything that I say is not opinion, belief, or perspective. It is the truth. There are numerous reports. There's overwhelming evidence of mass graves of infants and children around the world, including Canada.
Yeah, like we just went through our process with our Indigenous babies, and coming across how many young children were taken and died and no one knew. And so we know we have that history too, but then there's no connection. We're as Western society, we're so individualistic. We cut that string that attaches us to all of this. So we're like, oh, that was different. And that's not the way that was. And that's not the same thing that you're saying, and the other person and the other person, you know what I mean? So it's so, because of how well this has been sold to us, and as you said, on a global level, we can't fathom the idea of it being anything but what we've been sold.
So you're naming the two parts to this, is the relentless bombardment of the propaganda.
Yes. Okay.
You have to believe these false narratives. You have to believe in the fantasies that we're selling to you. And for anyone who doubts it, any shadow of a doubt is taken out. This is an isolated case, right? And as you said before, it's quickly brushed under the rug.
Yeah.
It's brought up and then quickly forgotten until the next case. So for me, since I have been tracking murders of children in placements, is the way that I put it.
Yes.
Children in temporary placements. So you mentioned foster care. We'll address that.
Yeah.
So temporary and permanent placements. My mind immediately goes to Carry On Franks. I believe it was Vancouver. Starved to death. Teenager, not a young child. Teenager. Starved to death in his placement. More recently, two brothers, Indigenous, adopted by same sex. See, even I slip up, right? They were placed with the same sex couple, two Indigenous brothers. In the investigation, it revealed hate speech. They hated these brothers to the point where one of them was killed. And why this hasn't reached the airwaves, why this hasn't reached international media and become a huge deal. So it is to your point, right? And this is following very recent outburst from the Indigenous First Nations and tribes about the mass graves of 90 somewhat children of theirs. Here are two more boys, Indigenous, with clear evidence of hateful text messages between this couple, to the point where one of the brothers died. Where's the outrage? So that's the power of propaganda by a global industry that is constantly about controlling public perception. It's public image. And every now and then there will be a case, there will be a murder, there will be abuse, but then it's quickly brushed under the rug. So let's address a bit more of this language. Foster care
Yes.
and adoption and care placements and state care, government care, everything's care.
Yes.
So what happens? How is this industry able to make billions per year taking children? How are these children being taken? What is actually happening behind the scenes? So many reports, falsified reports being filed against families, against parents. No history of abuse, no mental illness, nothing. And suddenly, nope, we saw something, someone called something in, we're going to take your child. I had the thought today, it's similar to what typical disciplining of children has turned into, which is anything the child does, oh, we're taking away your privileges. We're taking away your phone. We're taking away your, I don't know, taking away your TV. It's more turned into like taking away your internet, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And in many cases, it's actually taking away all your supports. We're going to punish you by taking away all the things that help you maintain yourself, right? Doesn't make any sense. So whatever the offense was, right? Whatever, that's it. Taking your phone, taking the internet, right? It's anything that comes up about parents or the family. Oh, that's it. Kids are gone. No matter what might have been reported, no matter what might have been filed away as the reason to, it's like the catch-all, we're taking the kids. So that thought came to mind. It's like, it doesn't matter what is reported or what gets filed. It's just an automatic, nope, the kids need to be safe. Nope, the kids are being neglected. No, it doesn't even matter if there is an offense or not. Oh, yeah. We're taking your kid. Why? And for who, right? So seeing it through the lens, this is a global industry operating locally. This is how it gets really complicated, right? And confusing, because everyone, like I have a colleague over in the UK that calls it displacement. And so we're having to build like a universal translator for all the different terms that we like to use for ourselves and make sense for ourselves. But it's the same way it's operating, just under different terms and labels, and right. So in any case, why are kids being sourced for a global human trafficking industry? Right? It's to maintain the supply for people who are being sold on, this is a way to create your family. This is a way to save this child from abuse, neglect, and certain death. And the outcome is it's exploitation, child exploitation, right? Because whether it's a state or a private agency or individual attorney, whoever's facilitating this process, we'll have to name the process, by the way, whoever is facilitating this process where I have a child who wants it, right? There needs to be, in any industry, need for supply to meet a demand.
Yeah.
Right? What the criminal element in this is, the product, the commodity is a human being, which around the world is defined as human trafficking, which is a crime. Nowhere around the world, people might argue, but generally around the world, buying and selling of a human being is illegal, is a crime, except if it's foster care, if it's called adoption. So the process, why the industry needs a middle person, right? Needs a dealer to bring this supply and demand together and go through this process of turning a human being into a commodity that can then legally be transported, transferred, moved from one place to another, from one family to another, from without incurring any legal consequence, right? From being called out that you're committing a crime. Well, no, this is no longer a human being. So this is important, like an important point. This is what's behind the whole commodification process that we call adoption, right? That we call fostering, is turning a human being into a commodity, into a product. So we're no longer human beings. We no longer have rights. We no longer have a legal status as a human being, right? So this is what I struggle with, because there's a global human rights movement for victims of this industry, all saying we want our birth records. We want our identities back. We want our birth records back. We are human beings, and we also accept the terminology from the industry. So we're all out there calling ourselves adoptees and birth parents, and also saying, but we're human beings. In my mind, I'm like, no, you can't have it both ways. The industry wants us, this is part of the fantasy, this is part of the false narrative, wants us to make it about adoption, calling ourselves adoptees and birth parents and all the labels that make sense to the industry. But in reality, we're victims of crimes, of a whole criminal industry. So calling it adoption, foster care, and birth mothers and birth fathers and birth countries, it's all about covering up the crimes that are happening underneath these labels, right? So you can't go out there calling yourself an adoptee and say I'm a human being, because either you are accepting the false narrative as the adoptee, or you're fighting the false narrative, I am a human being and I've been commodified. So that's just a nuance about the language and the whole idea of foster care adoption. It's all the cover up to the underlying crimes, supply and demand, commodifying human beings so they can be legally transferred and transported, which are acts of human trafficking. So when people say, oh, I was adopted, they're really saying I was commodified.
Yeah.
But how many people really make that connection, right?
Yeah.
In the public spaces, but also for victims. How
Right.
many of them really understand, are really, again, challenging the accepted narratives and all that? How many of them are actually breaking that down for themselves?
But would
And
you say part of that is like this has been going on for hundreds and hundreds, and we said could thousands of years, and only in real time now there's language and there's a pushback and there's a process of, oh, wait a minute, this isn't what you guys sold it to the people that took us. And so is this something that is only now coming to the surface, or is this something that someone like me is only now learning about? There's like, I'm curious, has there been folks like yourself that have been actively sharing, talking, teaching, and unlearning for years and years and years? Or is this new and something that I'm just trying to connect the dots to some people that haven't gotten there? That the only way, and not to for a second say that I can understand and relate the where empathy. And so the way that I can connect is when I started unpacking my own internal racism and all of these isms and what and who, because I had assimilated so hard. But I didn't have the language for years and years. I had the gut feelings in these some of these situations, but I never had the language. I didn't understand what microaggressions were. I didn't understand what some of this was. And it wasn't until, for me, recent, when a lot of work was being done by people. And I think there's one good thing to social media, which is we have a connection and can learn some of these things. And so coming across these videos, being educated, just like how I found you. And then I can say, oh, okay, this makes sense. So is that sort of where where you would say the community, your community is at, or has this been going on actively
Mhm.
doing the work for, because there's also the argument Black Lives Matter didn't just happen during COVID. That's where so many of us locked into it with George Floyd, but there's been activists for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. You know what I mean? So just curious in that sense of like, for your community members who don't get it quite yet, or maybe don't
Mhm.
see it in this way, is it because this is a newer conversation?
Appreciating that you started off saying you're new to all this, so you are in a learning process. This is a learning conversation for you. So
Yes.
it's also a learning conversation for me to see where you're at and how you're putting it together and how you're connecting the dots. And I really appreciate you taking the time and making the effort to understand it, to make sure that you get the clear picture. Oh, it's this and not everything else that I've heard. Not so many of the things that you brought up, right? That's out there. That's made to confuse and obfuscate the truth and conflate the issues. So maybe as a way to answer your question, a point of confusion, major point of confusion, is to minimize and even deny the trafficking crimes
Mm-hmm.
and redirect, really misdirect all the attention back to, well, this is a child welfare issue. This is a child protection issue. This is a child placing issue. There's all this overwhelming evidence, abuse, murders, crimes against humanity. Right? We haven't even brought up slavery. You've mentioned a number of times. So outright crimes, and somehow all the attention comes back to what do we do with the children who need to be placed? They're getting murdered. This commodification process is really a child slavery process, because again, back 400 years ago, they needed a child labor force for the new colonies. It's child slavery. You commodify someone, you buy and sell someone, you own them. Owning a human being is slavery, enslaving them. So we haven't even really touched that. So the point being, all of this is getting conflated, confused on purpose. So there's two aspects to this. For victims of the industry, yeah, we're having to unlearn and relearn. We're having to realign the false narratives. We have to dismantle the propaganda. We have to, the way that I say it, we need to deprogram from the brainwashing, which all comes more in the context of like cults. You did mention religion. So
Yep.
cult culture, when people, I don't know if the right word is defect, but when they leave, they go through a deprogramming process,
Yeah.
undo all that brainwashing. So that made the most sense to me, putting all the pieces together. It's a deprogramming process.
And there's also, we're just talking on this like this intellectual level. Like, we're not even talking about the lack of emotional safety that you're having to relearn, the amount of therapy of processing and like the trauma behind the deprogramming as well. Like there would be, and again, I can only on the surface bring up the racial trauma that I had experienced for years and years and years and didn't understand it. And when I started to deprogram myself with how I thought of my own people and myself, surrounding myself with only white people, like it took me a long time, and probably not nearly as long as I would imagine for someone that's had their whole identity taken from them and then told what it has to be. And so in therapy, like just the amount of crying and processing and like fear and like all of we're not even going there. Yeah, the denial of like, what? And some people were safe people, quote unquote, or that sold or told or made you think what you did. So you got to like unlearn about these people and all that. So like we haven't even discussed that, and I just want to point that
Sure.
out because of the correlation to
Absolutely.
the extreme mental health struggles and what you had talked about a few minutes prior about suicide. So there's murders, and then
Mm.
we can argue it's someone in your community took their own life, or that is where their life ended given what their life experience was. So call it suicide, call it what you will, but these people are no longer here because of the pain they had to experience. So we haven't even, like, I just want to throw that out there because we're having an intellectual conversation, but there's a lot.
Mhm.
There's a lot beneath the surface, I would imagine, as a human being reliving and experiencing something that maybe you didn't make sense of, but your gut was telling you something all your life.
Thank you for
So,
making that point, and thank you for steering the conversation, because in a way there are these two parts: the thinking and the feeling,
yes.
right? In order to really grasp, here's the reality, here's the truth, the industry, the supply and demand, everything that we've just covered, we're talking about human beings.
Yeah.
You've led on, you have some empathy with a similar experience, at least with internalized racism and that piece, when we're taken transracially from our homelands and being put into very white homogenous communities, and essentially being raised white. And this hasn't really been my personal experience, but being called a banana, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and all the racial slurs, it became personal during COVID.
Yeah.
The very beginning of the outbreak, having it be called a China virus,
Yeah.
coming across story after story of children in schools dealing with racial slurs. Go back to your country. Having all that come to the surface when there haven't been ongoing PSAs, there haven't been sociology trainings and classes and for minorities, people of color, like you said, the BIPOC community.
Mm-hmm.
We know it, we feel it, we experience it, but for those of us who have been taken and raised as, where, yeah, like you, I had diversity in my personal circles of friends, but my foundation was still coming from that white privileged perspective of society, of life, of my worldview. So from that, I've been asked, so how do you help? How do I help my clients? And for many years, it was what I now realize. Well, I was just going along with the narratives and what we put out there for ourselves, that we are reclaiming the narrative, we're reclaiming our voices, we're saying it how we see it. To me, it's still not getting us to the truth. It's
Mm-hmm.
getting us to our truths and our
Yes.
language and how we want to tell our stories,
Yeah.
author our stories. But I've been after the truth. I want to take it beyond my truth in the way that because the fallback position for the industry and everyone who supports the false, well, that's just your experience. That's how you see it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we constantly find ourselves pigeonholed, trapped, cornered into saying, because we haven't collectively gotten there to the objective truth about the industry, about the millions of us around the world, about so many populations. So this is a collective experience. This is not an individual experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this person ended up with a good family and a good home and a good neighborhood, and this person was given over to abusers and criminal types, so who do we end up listening to, right?
Yeah. Good question.
The where we have to land is not based on outcomes. It's based on the underlying what has been done to all of us that have been standardized operating procedures for the industry.
Yeah, because can I just say, and
Yeah,
pardon my swearing, but this is middle fingers up. It is kind of fucked up that the way you put it, like, we go to the outcomes. Like, we just erase the experience, what was done leading up to this outcome of, well, this kid still turned out okay. This kid is happy to say that they were adopted and they come from a great family and what. And there's only a couple over here that would say the opposite of that. And like, it's so wild that that's where we go to always, is that we're always looking at the end result and not the build up, not what's bringing us here. And just like as a little child acting out, it was literally the end, the behavior versus what's underlying this huge iceberg of all that's going on. There's more to it. And we do that on so many other systemic levels as well. And it locked in when you said it. I'm like, yeah, like it's so weird that weird is like the worst word to pick, but it's terrible that we are waiting to get to the end result to say, wow, these kids still turned out okay. Not, well, did they? Who said they turned out okay? And they don't, have we talked to them? Like, as you're like, you don't know our internal battles of what was going on in these, scenarios and moments and whatnot.
All of that comes from the industry.
Yeah.
There's research, there's studies, all based on outcomes.
The devil's advocate.
So be mindful, be aware of where you get your information, where the studies are coming from, where the numbers coming from, why there's always a push for looking at the outcomes rather than how did they get there. So I wanted to kind of bring this back in, because at one point you asked, so is this all new? No.
Yes.
No, this isn't all new. There have been other victims, outspoken, not willing to buy into the propaganda. My go-to part of history is the Carlisle residential school here in the US. This was all part of the assimilation campaign to bring the indigenous children into the now dominant American culture. And as I have learned about this, I want to be clear, like I stand as an ally, part of the BIPOC community. So I am elevating their history, their voices, what was done to them as a precursor to adoption. And I'll weave that in there. So the US started these residential schools to assimilate indigenous children who were then escaping and returning back to their parents and tribes, saying, they're abusing us, they're raping us, they're leaving us for dead. No one questioned, no one in their tribe. They all came together and said, we're shutting this down. There's no, well, what about the ones who are getting educated? What are the, right? Outcome based, right?
Yeah.
No, screw that.
Yeah.
This is all wrong. They're taking our lands, they're taking our children, they're eradicating our people. This is, in one of the videos I watched, this is genocide disguised as a social good.
Yeah.
For who, right? So they fought over 150 years, where the US built 350 of these schools around the country, even as a united First Nations, indigenous peoples coming together and saying, we're shutting this down. It took them that long under unified voice. We're not going to buy your propaganda, the pictures and the stories that you're selling to your communities as if these schools are doing amazing things.
Yeah.
we're going to shut the whole thing down. So for me, that is an inspiration for this generation around the world, that the industry is more than just targeting indigenous tribes and First Nations,
Yeah.
because like any industry, it needs to expand. It just always greedy after profits, more and more profits, more and more supply, more and more demand. It just, that's the way industry goes. So now it's not just impoverished families. It's not just the homeless or criminal types or drug users, or right. It's gone after every demographic possible, and
Yeah.
it's expanding to other markets. So after the residential schools, the industry did a switch, right? It said, well, forget about schools. Yeah, they're cumbersome. Let's just get them right into white American Christian homes and families through adoption. So the residential schools were a precursor to, let's just get them right into our families. Let's just assimilate them right into and raise them as our own. But there's
Please
more.
take.
To go from here, the industry is doing another pivot. What we've been covering, adoption, foster care, child placing markets, they are falling by the wayside. There's all these social justice issues, human rights issues, just there's so much backlash, thankfully, right? And coming from all different fronts. So the industry isn't concerned about these social justice issues. It's saying, we've plateaued, the profits have plateaued. How do we keep building? How do we keep growing? We want more. We want more profits. We want, right? Like, so it took 400 years for the adoption market, right? In the meantime, there's the fertility markets. Mm. With advancements in science, medicine, healthcare systems. So I'm going to roll this into the mental health systems as well, or rather industry. And let's use current and emerging advancements in science, medicine, healthcare to develop these newer markets in IVF, surrogacy, egg donation. So now it's, forget about saving children. We want people who don't want to mess up their bodies, willing to pay boatloads of money and create a family, all based on this idea that they have a right to be a parent. They have a right to a child. They have a right to raise a family, which is all nonsense. There's no right to be a parent. There's no law that I have a right to this child. So the industry is pivoting again, just as it did between the residential schools and just get right into white American Christian homes. It's saying, okay, all these victims, all you don't like all this, right? All these issues, birth records and birth parent reunions and birth country tours, forget that. Let's just embrace science and medicine, technology, and start creating, growing babies so people can create their families exactly the way they want. Because this is the promise that we've been saying all along. You can have your forever family fantasy. Adoption made us billions of dollars, enough capital to build out these newer markets. Egg donation, surrogacy, IVF, fertility markets. There's a whole reproduction tourism market out there. People are traveling to different countries because it's cheaper, because certain things are allowed over there. So they've built all this out. So all that we've just covered, not to diminish it in any way, is the precursor to where the industry is going next. And to bring in your last point, we're talking about human beings, and there's generations of us who are still living. We're still here. having to unlearn and relearn what was actually done to us. At the same time, fight for our human rights, fight to be seen as a human being in the public eye. I can't tell you how often I tear up and I cry reading these cases. And let me just pause on this 11-year-old girl. Like you mentioned, well, there's a clinical therapeutic process that we go through. This is part of it. This is the part that we push away, deny. Like, I have my own lived experience. I have my own traumas. I have my own pain to deal with and manage and figure out. But we're part of a global population. Just the other day, I dug into what happened to this little girl, Arabella Sembrano, and she was placed with a church leader whose entire family, civil servants, the wife was a minister, a youth minister at their local church. It's called a mega church. A youth minister. Her husband was a border patrol agent. Her parents were volunteers at the police department, and they took Arabella and her two sisters, 2018, foster care, moved into a permanent placement where there was ongoing abuse, starvation, beatings, you name it. All those years up until 2022, when one final call landed Arabella in the hospital, where the hospital staff uncovered 15 bone fractures. Arabella weighed 11 years old, 48 pounds, the same weight as a 5-year-old. And there's images, skin and bone. The investigation uncovered over 700 counts of abuse during those 4 years, to the point where Arabella just, obviously her body couldn't take it anymore. This keeps happening. There's new cases that come up every year, all kinds of situations, all kinds of abuses in a system run by an industry, all promoted as saving children's lives, creating families. And now this industry is shifting. We're just going to double down on commodifying human lives for generations to come. They're not going to have a pre-trauma state. Like, there's not going to be a history. These aren't toddlers or even like newborns. Where the industry is going, we're going to grow babies from stem cells, laboratory settings. This was all hyped up 5 years ago. It's called IVG, in vitro gametogenesis. At the time, was all put out there. You can grow baby from skin cells. The stem cell technology is this advanced. And then suddenly, no more talk about IVG, no more talk about stem cell growing babies in labs. But just last year, we started hearing about pregnancy robots. We know about artificial wombs. They're used for preemies, for ICUs, and premature births. So again, all of this is getting dripped out to the public, whether it's true or not. The pregnancy robots out of China turned out to be a hoax, right? But it caught global attention. That was the point. To normalize the idea. And that's where surrogacy, egg donation, IVF has been around for so long. It's normalized to think, oh yeah, I can ask someone to carry my baby. I can take someone else's egg and implant them in me and make them my baby. It's normalizing all these workarounds nature. For what? And for who? For an industry making billions. We're talking hundreds of billions. So that's what I'm looking at. And so the human element to this, and I'll speak for myself, and I'm like getting chills just as I'm about to tell you, the realization and like the ongoing realization, looking into the mirror. I'm a member of a global population of commodified people that has our own history, our own culture. This is an ongoing legacy. And every day, I'm faced with these false narratives. People coming to me, well, what about this? And what about that? And What about the gratitude and savor, no offense to you, right? Every day, it is a constant bombardment that I know these are false narratives just getting pushed out there by this with billions of dollars. Just send the messages out over the internet, social media, traditional media, the airwaves, to keep people believing. And I'm here saying, fuck this industry, right? Like, so the invitation onto your podcast and this whole middle fingers up. Yeah, this industry continues its ongoing legacy. And me, who recognizes I am a human being who's been commodified. I'm not an adoptee. I'm a human being who's been taken from his home country, from his homeland, to face an industry that continues to brainwash, that continues to push its propaganda, and I'm faced with being gaslit, silenced, defamed, discredited, diminished, denied. This is so far beyond like disenfranchised grief. How do you create a holding space, as we've done here? I think we've done a pretty fantastic job between you and me. How do we create a holding space for millions? How do we bring this out to a mental health industry that has bought into the false narratives, that are also perpetuating them onto victims seeking mental health services, where so many say, I have to educate my therapist, where I have to confront their own personal attitudes because they have a relative, because they have a friend who landed in a good home.
Yeah.
What do you mean you have trauma?
I will say this over and over, having been in mental health, knowing people that are therapists, they are also humans. They are not perfect. They don't know everything. And it is like more than possible that you will sit across a therapist who is not going to get it. And that could be because of coming as a client, like the one clients that you work with, your experience being taken, and that can be with racial trauma, that can be for our trans community, that can be for so many people that are experiencing, like we said, social justice related everyday real life experiences. Someone wants to get an abortion and goes to a therapist, and the therapist has strong beliefs. Like this is, for me, being part of mental health, like it is a therapist's responsibility to get that shit in check, because A, you don't know what's going to come before you when you sit down with a client, and B, like we are complex individuals that are all connected, and we cannot, I never was a therapist, so I'm not going to claim that I was, but as someone who worked in mental health, as anyone that's in that community, like there is a huge expectation of being able to hold on to your own beliefs, put them aside as you help someone work through theirs. Like it's not about you. But so many people will not go back to therapy because of an experience on multiple times where, as you said, they have to educate the therapist who is deciding to use this therapy session as their school. Like these are wild things that happen in therapy sessions. And so I've walked away from people that were friends that are therapists, and I'm like, I can't, because I cannot even believe you asked me this about my own community, because you had a South Asian man come to a session with you, and this is now one South Asian man versus the thousands of white males you're seeing, and this is now what you've decided, and you're a therapist, so it's sad that you have people from your community that can't safely talk about their experience and are being told, what? No, that's just your personal, you're just mad at your adoptive parents.
It's so minimized.
Yeah.
Microaggressed.
Yeah.
That you mentioned, and
there's bigger issues going on in the world. Like somebody's going to throw that out, and it's like, whoa, hold on a second. every angle can be looked at it from that perspective, then that there's something bigger going on. And how many people downplay it too, right? I know my problem isn't as big as someone else's, and I know I didn't have the same experience, because people are on edge about not wanting to claim space. And this is why this is my one way of doing it, is this platform where it's like, no, this is our space. We get to come here and we get to talk about these things, and we don't have to agree with everything, and we don't have to have experienced the same stuff as each other, but we have to understand that all these stories are connected on a bigger level. And if we see one part of it, it's like, I have 2 boys, they're biracial, and I'm like, they're learning that them being part of a race is one intersection. And if they're going to come home and share the struggles of racism, they also have to understand that they have to care just as much about other humans out there too. Humans like trans people, part of the LGBTQ plus community, other people of color, people experiencing body dysmorphia. We don't just get to sit here and say, well, this is my issue and it's huge, and everybody please do something about it, which would be great. But we also have to say, okay, well, how do I want to show up in this community? Like, what's my role here? Not what is this community doing for me? And I think we have as humans a lot of work that we have to understand, like that we have to, a lot more of, as you've been saying, unlearning and unpacking to do, because it's not so black and white.
So I want to speak to the intersections and kind of a perspective of being each other's allies.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your points, and I appreciate you bringing in your own personal experiences, and the fact that you are a mother and you have boys, and it is these intersections that we can come together on a common ground and find commonality in perspectives and empathy and lived experiences. So I want to bring up a few things, if I can keep track of them. But for myself, like, I realized, and maybe this should have been in the introduction, but I think it took this conversation to get here. I embody so many intersections. So it's not just being taken from my homeland. I am a person who lives with a disability, with multiple disabilities at this point in my life. Some that I had been born with. So I was born with cerebral palsy, and I've developed autoimmune disorders and other health related issues, thyroid, gut issues, things that have now been found to be related to trauma. I did mention that I'm a survivor of child abuse, but also suicide and suicide loss, and being a member of multiple minority groups in this country, certainly bearing witness to all that's happening to the entire population, but certainly targeting the immigrant populations, minority groups that I'm a member of. So that point about the intersections, it's not just about, again, adoption, foster care. We're all affected by how we treat each other, by how we treat our children, by how we're dishonoring families, by separating them for profit, destroying families and devastating communities for profit. What I had mentioned about surrogacy and these fertility markets, this isn't just about adoption and foster care. The industry is looking to create a way for everyone around the world, under the idea, I can create a family, I can have a child, I can be a parent if I participate in this industry, right? It's a global industry. It's not targeting one group or another, or one country or another. It's globalizing its market. I mean, it already has. It's continuing to globalize its marketplace of human beings. So this does impact all of us. And you say, well, this little platform and your podcast and your work, but it's significant. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to get choked up, I think.
It's okay. It's a great place to get choked up.
Okay. Well,
we support that.
To keep it real, right?
Yes. Yes.
Allyship is so important to recognize the human in ourselves, the human being in ourselves, the human being in each other, to say that I need to be an ally, not only to him, but the whole population that he represents, that he's coming here to speak about on behalf of. We have to build allyship when we find these intersections that connect us on a human level, not labels or skin color or any other superficial level. We're human beings. And my population is getting massacred, infants and children. And it's not getting globally recognized because, as we said so long ago, every case is being treated in isolation of each other. So we have to create these spaces to expand it out. This is more than just outcomes. This is more than just trauma. This is more than just human rights violations. This is all of humanity. Humanity is on the chopping block. What is the world going to look like? The world of human beings, right? The world of humankind, what is it going to look like if a whole generation is going to be born from a laboratory without mothers and fathers, just gametes? Where's humanity going to be if we don't have mothers and fathers and families, and everyone comes with a price tag? So that's something to really think about, because this global industry that I say is working in upwards of $400 billion worldwide is building out its marketplace right now, where IVG will be a reality in the near future, nearer than we think, even if it's 20 years from now, right? Within our own lifetimes, because we're already seeing and watching and hearing the industry drip out, testing the waters. Are they ready? Have they normalized the idea of growing people in labs yet? What else do we need to do? How else do we chip away at their sense of what is right and what is wrong? So thankfully, when it comes to allyship and the amount of information and knowledge that's attainable today, I'm aware that there is a center of bioethics that's out there that's saying surrogacy is wrong. We need to stop this industry. We need to stop these markets. Thankfully, there is an anti-surrogacy movement that is making headway. But it's not enough. Let me bring it back to, if we don't have these spaces that you and I just created just now during this time, and there's millions of us with our pain and traumas, beliefs, false narratives, and propaganda, if the whole world has bought into this industry, is helping it brainwash everybody, and we're already facing therapists, the mental health industry that perpetuates the narratives and beliefs and propaganda of this industry. Who do we turn to? How do we have these conversations with people like you who's saying, oh, there's something here we need to put a spotlight on, I need to learn about, I need to acknowledge? How do we reach more people like you willing to be allies? It takes a great amount of energy to have these conversations, to be in therapy, to unpack all of this. For so many of us, it takes lifetimes. Many of us, we don't even get there. For so many of us, it's easier to believe in the fantasy and play along and pretend and shut down that other part of ourselves that's saying, this isn't right. So many of us give up on ourselves and we go along with it. So where I typically land is, where is this going to go? Where is this headed? If we're able to lay out the landscape, kind of as we've done here, what's next? What's on the horizon? Where's this going? And who's in charge? Who's leading the way? I appreciate the invitation onto your podcast to have this conversation today. I would look forward to carrying it on because, as you're saying, it is so complex. There's so many avenues. There's so many things contributing, and it's ever evolving. New cases are coming up all the time. New policies are being created and passed around the world all the time. So this is, for me, an ongoing conversation. We've just tipped the iceberg.
And I think most of us are connected through social media. And I think when we come across something that just seems like it's wild, it's not possible, it's just, there's no way that could be true. We ourselves haven't had experience along that story or whatever it is that we're coming across. I think it's helpful. Whatever comes out of that for us is one thing, but I think it's very helpful that we pause and ask ourselves, why am I getting defensive? Why are my, red flags going off? How am I just assuming without even understanding or knowing? And again, where we each land, like, that's out of my control. It's out of your control. I'm not going to argue that, but I would encourage us to be more open to the general response of, well, that's just fake news. It is very important that we're educating ourselves and understanding, like, what is going on in the world outside of our own bubble, outside of the little world we've created in our own context. It's safer, I get it, but there's a lot going on out there. And I think we all are being impacted by all of these issues on a global level. And, your community, your story, what you are fighting for is a part of this big ass picture that we are all living in, this sky that we're all living under. So we kind of have a responsibility as humans to do our due diligence. And that whole confirmation bias, if I keep following my algorithm, of course I'm going to get all the BIPOC stories and whatnot, because that's what I want. So I have to also be open to, like, what is going on in that other part of this crazy world that I don't want to have anything to do with, where you live. Whether I agree with what your president is doing or not is not the issue. The issue is that I'm choosing to just look away. I'm choosing to not understand what's happening. And for the record, I just want to say I don't agree with anything he's doing. I really want that known. But I think we have a due diligence to sit at a table and understand, why are you coming from this point? Why am I coming from this point? Where do we land? What's this about? As you said earlier, we are all human. There's an intersection we all actually come to together with all of the many hats we are wearing, and that is the human intersection. So, it made me think while you were talking today how hard it is to bring an animal home in your life. Like, there's a process that we all have to go through if we want to, quote unquote, adopt an animal. And it is, like, really sad and disgusting that we think less of each other as humans and don't understand what's happening to little babies, to children, and how easy it is to take a child, because I feel I can. And I also just want to clarify something. This is new for me, so I want to do this, is when we are talking about fertility, when we are talking about surrogacy, like, I do want to respect those that are in a home that are wanting to have children and biologically are unable to, and are going through the process of fertility, to help them. Like, are you saying that it should not be happening at all, or are you talking about in the same realm of what's happened for those of you that have been taken in that sense? Because I want to clarify that.
Thank you
as well. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. And also clarify, this industry has been going on for centuries. Doesn't matter who's been in office. Doesn't matter what political party is in power. This is happening in numerous countries under all kinds of different governments and rule. So, to clarify, I am against the industry, the crimes that it has committed. And let's be clear about these crimes, that these are crimes against humanity. This needs to be defined because there is a category of crimes against humanity, which include genocides,
Yes.
slavery, and mass murder. And these are the three that I bring up on a regular basis to say this industry that promotes itself as saving children and creating families by way of a commodification process,
Yeah.
an enslavement process, has for centuries been committing crimes against humanity. So
Yeah.
I am against the industry, and this is where people get confused. So again, point of clarification. People have been making arrangements within families, neighbors, communities, tribes to help collectively raise their young outside of a profit-making industry. Just as we're reinventing ancient practices of health and medicine, there was a time where there was not an industry saying you can have this child for some value of something else.
Yeah.
There was a collective understanding we need to keep our way of life, pass it along through the generations. We need to keep our culture, pass it along to future generations to keep it going. There have been long-standing, and I will say ancient practices of raising children outside of an industry that says we're going to take a profit and commodify and exploit, traffic, and along the way, we're going to decimate cultures and turn entire populations into slaves and mass murder their kids. So that's the point of clarification. I'm against the industry that continues today to commit these crimes against humanity under the guise of adoption.
Well said. And really, I think when you're talking about real life, real conversation, there's no transition. We've had a pretty powerful dialogue today. I think a lot of the silence in between is a good indicator of needing to take that transition, needing to take that moment, because this is not a very easy conversation to have, but also to you're coming on talking about your story, the advocacy that you are doing for your community, but then also this huge responsibility of educating. And I think that part is probably very tiring at times, because you've had to sit here and share a lot with someone like me and the community that's going to chime in and be part of this conversation. Because for many of us, this is, as I had said earlier, we're newcomers to this. And anywhere we are newcomers, whether it be to a country, whether it be to a job, whether it be to a conversation, I think we all appreciate the compassion and the care that you brought forward in having this conversation. So thank you for that. I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I is there anything, Moses, that you wish that we did cover, or you want to go back and clarify?
I think that's actually a dangerous question because we could launch into hours and hours.
Another
more.
2 hours.
But what I do want to say is I hope that your listeners and the audience here will engage,
Yeah.
will take part in this conversation, will add their thoughts and feelings and reactions, and I welcome it. It is welcomed and very much appreciated because there is so much confusion,
Yeah.
so many parts of the narrative, so many different narratives. And I will point out that we're not a unified community. You keep referring to us as a community, so I'll go with that. We're not a unified community. We're divided in very significant ways. We didn't really get into all of that, but there is a strong message to listen to adoptees. But I will tell you, not all adoptees agree with everything that I've just shared. So it is important to know who to listen to. And that means knowing the red flags, as you were saying, knowing what the false narratives are, the language, the terms being used, the terminology being used. So there is a fundamental knowledge base in order to realize, to know who to listen to and what they're saying and how it all fits in. So I'll say that we only get there when everybody engages in the conversation.
Yeah.
So I really hope everyone does.
I think that's well said. And I think many of us can understand the complicating factors in having different, as you said, the divides. I think even in a South Asian community, that's something that we come up against again in terms of immigrants, not immigrants, model minority, civic sense, newcomer. Like there's a lot of divide. And again, we keep saying this in so many of our episodes, especially today, like all of this is connected to a bigger picture. We are made, taught, brainwashed to have these divides, because if we are having these arguments within our own, you're right, I keep saying community, with our own pods of people, then we don't have to leave that and carry it and come as unified, because there's nothing worse than becoming a global majority to the industry, to all the governments, all people that hold power, that are running the show and want to keep running the show. And I think that we have to continue to challenge that. Why do we have these divides in these kinds of experiences that we've had? What is that about? So I can appreciate what you're saying. It's like, okay, you hear one story, you hear a couple, but that's not the be all end all. There's a lot more to this. Okay, so lastly, what do you, I think you've done a great job answering this throughout the whole episode, but what do you want to put your middle fingers up to today?
I think I've made it clear. It is this global human trafficking industry that really is looking to make us all victims for profit.
I just want to say to everybody, these conversations that we're having here on MFU, they are door openers. And just that, some of these conversations we're having for the first time. Today was an example for me. This is the first time engaging, learning, understanding, least trying to understand. And so with these door openers, it often means that we're going to have follow-up questions. It means that we're going to have feedback. And I encourage everyone to reach out. Maybe I will get Moses to tell us the best place to get in touch and where people can follow you, learn more. We'll also have that in our show notes. But where can people start following you and understanding more?
So to learn more, I have two websites. One is called the Society for Adoption Truth.org. This is the activism specifically about the murder cases. There are a number of petitions on there. There are position statements. So that is a place where you can learn and engage on the activism around children being murdered in this industry. So more for me, for my work, it's the truthguide.com. So that one is thetruthguide.com. I'm, as you know, active on social media, Instagram, Facebook primarily. And I am, hopefully this year will expand to TikTok and get more active, kind of revitalize my YouTube channel as well.
Yeah.
As well as Twitter.
Right.
So,
good. Yeah. So I think today was an example of understanding that good intentions don't cancel harm, and care without accountability is not care, it's control. And I think we have to read between the lines a little bit more. And sometimes it can't be done alone. And so I encourage us to reach out to each other, get help, reach out to people like Moses to get more information. We can't live this life thinking we know everything or that we're expected to know everything. I think we're just asking each other, asking ourselves to be open to understanding something outside of what we think we've known. And that's what a lot of today was about. And I hope you guys reach out to Moses. Of course, you know where to find me if you have any feedback. And any last words, Moses?
I'll leave it with my saying, which is the human trafficking industry uses adoption as propaganda to run a global child supply market. If you can get that, that is a place to start. And I'm open to receiving any messages and speaking with people and expand this conversation. So thank you. Truly, thank you.